record this, Kristen. So just in case, we can always put it up later. That's right. So a little insurance, if you will. So listen, I won't, we'll try to piece this together. We'll make lemonades out of lemons. But you told us a little bit about how you and Jenny met and how it was a school project. But I was asking you a little bit about community support and what it looked like early on. You mentioned that young lady from Henrico.
Yeah, Elaine Olay from Henrico shared with us that there was a family, the Largos, had just moved from New York, and they had a 7-year-old boy that wanted to participate in sports and didn't want to do it in the way that organizations like the Miracle League or things like that did it. He wanted to win, he wanted to lose, he wanted to participate. And so that's kind of, they became, I guess, in my opinion, it became my mission to make sure that Christian had those opportunities. And then, you know, we just kept knocking on doors and bringing people on board as much as we can. Because we didn't have facility space. So, you know, we had to work and collaborate and partner with other organizations to make things happen.
Huh. Well, it's interesting, right? So Kristen and the Largo family, one of the first to reach out or need your services. And they've been, matter of fact, I talked to the Largos this week. They have remained active. They've been one of the number of families, athletes, and supporters that have been involved for all 15 years. You know, a really, really good group. Well, so tell me, okay, so it started through school, but so tell me what it looked like. Like we actually, you know, we got some sports on the ground. We're trying to actually get folks active. So tell me what the first sport looked like, maybe what the first session was.
First sessions, well, you know, it was power soccer because the equipment was cheap. I think all the equipment was just a few $1,000s. So our first fundraising effort was really sending out letters to family and friends and the initial people that I had coerced to be on the board. To send it out to their friends and family. We raised, you know, maybe it was just over $2,500. Filed our 501c3, which took a lot longer. I think we had to get an attorney involved at some point because it wasn't as easy as people said it was. And, you know, it was a process, but that power soccer was the cheapest for us to do because you just needed to get the guards for chairs that people already had, where we didn't have to go out and buy $3,000 sports chairs for basketball and things like that. So soccer was really, you know, it was big in Richmond, made sense. And then, you know, I think basketball was next. So soccer was key. We partnered with Henrico County. We had Deep Run Park, that rec center there was brand new. So they had open availability, and we just capitalized on being able to do as much as we could.
Did you do power soccer? I mean, did you have a background?
You know, no. No, we had, you know, both of us had our degrees in recreation therapy. So adapting sports and recreation for people with disabilities was what we went to school for. So we kind of did whatever we could, whether it was duct tape or extra bolts or I think at one point, Larry Watson had a tub, one of the tubs that you buy at like Walmart. We cut that and taped it onto his power chair so he could use that as a guard for power soccer. So we did whatever it took to just get people playing and participating, because the ball itself was maybe $80. So, you know, it was really just from the very basics. And then when we went into sports like basketball, you know, we had developed relationships through going to these conferences and national organizations. We'd pull people in and ask them to come in and do a clinic and help us get something rolling. And there was different companies, durable medical supply companies, that would help us with equipment, you know, give us used basketball chairs to load in the back of my car and bring out to Humphrey Calder and get the kids playing basketball with the rim riders. You know, so it really was just a matter of using whatever resources we could get from partnerships and support in the community.
So all right, so you started power soccer, then you go to basketball. Just curious, what's next?
Next, I made some notes. I want to say it was wheelchair tennis. So also involved early on was Steve Fetro, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but Steve was a big wheelchair tennis player. And And he had been involved with an organization called Richmond Athletes with Disabilities years and years ago in the 90s. And they, so I think we started to do a little bit with tennis when he was involved. And then we brought in Becky Leemon, that was our program manager, program director. We brought in Karen Korb, Paralympic athlete, and she did a wheelchair tennis clinic at VCU. I want to say that was like 2006, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped kick it off. And Richmond Tennis Association, Shima and Joe Grover were huge supporters of wheelchair tennis. So they helped us connect with City of Richmond and Victor Rizzi and get out there on those courts to do tennis.
You're mentioning all these names of people that are still involved.
I know, it's a good thing.
Okay, so you're doing all this, so I assume you must be working full time then for Sportable. I mean, this sounds like a big undertaking. This is your full time gig, right?
No. No.
So,
it wasn't.
Where are you working? How are you managing to do all this?
So my first job, I actually, when Jenny and I finished school, I remember sitting in our class and my professor said to me, I was planning to go to PT school after I graduated with my degree in rec therapy. And she said, "You're not going to PT school." And I said, "Hell, I am." I said, "I've been working. The only reason I'm getting my degree in rec therapy is to go to PT school." And she said, "You won't." And she was right. I ended up doing my internship at the Virginia home. And that's how I met all those amazing people. And, you know, worked for free all summer doing my internship and get Sportable up and running. And then they hired me on and I kept working to build Sportable on the side. And then went to the VA hospital, and that opened up a whole nother, you know, that opened up the adult arena, you know, and a whole different idea of adaptive sports, you know, from what the Virginia home exposed us to. So.
But
Yeah.
And they had a pretty active adaptive sports program, didn't they? I mean, at least they continued to. Nicole, who I think you worked with Nicole when.
Yeah, she was on the brain injury unit and I was on the spinal cord injury unit. So there was a few other folks on staff when I started, and I really worked with them on the adaptive sports side. So again, I got to go to these national wheelchair games tournaments, see all these different sports, meet all these different athletes. And every time it would just allow us an opportunity to come back and bring whatever we could, knowledge, a connection for somebody to come in and do a clinic.
Was there a lot of, you know, so the Largos kind of reached out right through the channel of the county, and they wanted more resources for their son. Did you find other people were reaching out and wanting more in our community? That, you know, was there a need there that you were filling?
Yeah, I think you would just naturally, there would be families, you know, I think of like the young boys. So there was Christian, there was Blake Rush, you know, who ended up going on to play wheelchair basketball in college. Colin, who's now doing a whole lot of things, but, you know, he started with basketball. I remember him coming in with crutches. He didn't even use a wheelchair all the time. And he came in, and you know, he really was a little bit hesitant, I think, in getting into a chair to play. And I said, I guarantee you it'll be a better experience, because it equals you know, levels out the playing field. Because a lot of times what these kids had experienced was more of, you know, playing adaptive sports with somebody in a walker, somebody on crutches, somebody in a power chair. And it was like, oh, you know, whatever they could do. Sportable was always intended to be a bit more competitive, a bit more, everyone's on the same playing field. So I remember Colin getting into that chair for the first time, and he wasn't really interested in wheelchair basketball, let's put it that way. And I think Michael, you know, so once the parents really saw what was happening with the kids, then it just was exponential. Then they would bring someone else that was interested in tennis, or, you know, a little girl came out, and it kept growing that way.
Well, so we've gone from power soccer to then basketball to then tennis. You're doing this all you're doing this all while fully employed at the VA, and then also, or at the Virginia home, and then again at the VA. So
Yeah,
then,
that's
so what's next, right? So how do you? By the way, you must have an army of volunteers that are helping all this.
we did have, I mean, we had a lot of volunteers, and the, you know, parents and everything were very helpful. So, I mean, Jenny was kind of the programs person. So, you know, she would just say, tell me what to do and I'll do it, you know, and that's kind of how we approached it in those early days. But, you know, we were both loading up wheelchairs, taking them apart, putting them in the back of cars, wherever we could get donated space, you know, so that dictated when we would be having programs, Thursday night, Friday night, whenever we could get it. I want to say that maybe cycling came next, because we did a little bit like just using Deep Run Park to be able to do rides and things like that. So just more casual, more recreation style, you know, just getting out and doing something different.
How did you support all of this financially? I mean, I mean, cycling is really expensive, right? Because really the equipment's such a huge barrier for all these things. I mean, how were you raising money and making ends meet?
Well, you know, it was a little bit of just whatever that annual fund campaign was for the year, and maybe little sponsorships here. Again, we borrowed a lot of equipment from Phil Mott, who was, I can't remember if he was with Invacare, Top End, you know, we had different companies that we partnered with, and we could, you know, when he got a new hand cycle or he'd lend it to us, so, you know, we maybe only had 3 hand cycles, and maybe I took 1 or 2 from the VA, and we, you know, did what we could. So it was always just piecemealing it together best we could, until things really turned around and we were able to get that larger grant funding.
Okay, so all right, so what is that larger? I mean, are you writing the grants, by the way? Who's?
I have to remember. So Deb Lockhart was, in 2011, I went through the Emerging Nonprofit Leaders Program with the Community Foundation. And so up until that point, I want to say, if somebody's out there and they helped with grants, I'm sure they did. I just can't think of who right now. So, but Deb came on, she was our volunteer development director. And she was the one that really took the lead with grants after we finished that ENLP program. She, you know, she wanted to get involved, get experience. She didn't need to get paid at the time. So she was basically a development director, but didn't take a paycheck for that. So she helped us get things organized grant-wise before we brought on Amanda, who's a consultant that helped us. I think when you were transitioning on, she was there for a couple years. But yeah, that first grant to the VA hospital, I did write it because that was actually a very unique situation where they were trying to, you know, support veterans having opportunities to participate in adaptive sports, and the Richmond VA hospital was a very key area because of the spinal cord and the traumatic brain injury unit. So they needed a nonprofit organization in the community to give their funding to that they received from the VA. So that was, you know, they needed to find that organization, and we happened to be that organization. I met with them on the flip side, being a VA employee though, and I never really talked or promoted Sportable in that sense, you know, in my role at the VA. So they were very excited to hear that they had an organization to be able to provide that funding to, so those programs could get up and running. So that was November 10th of 2009, we received that notification.
Not that date means anything.
Just a little bit.
Well, that represented a pretty big point, or at least an inflection point for the organization, right? Just because isn't that when we became quote unquote professionally staffed?
Yep. So yeah, I want to say I left the VA in December and came January 1st was the first check. And what we did is we said, we're going to buy, you know, went to the board, laid out the plan after they were crazy enough to accept my idea to take on this grant. You know, it just basically got to the point where we were growing and we had momentum, and if when else were we going to have this opportunity to have $100,000 come at us to take it to the next level? So it was risky for sure.
But by this point, it's just you, right?
Jenny had left. Yeah, Jenny had left. And so it really was, I couldn't do it alone anymore. And I wasn't doing it alone. You had a lot of volunteers and support and partners and parents, but I mean, it still was getting to be a large enough organization where it needed a staff person.
So when we say professionally staffed, was it you, or was it?
It was me, just me. Yep, so basically worked it out, and we said we're going to buy each quarter. We received a check from the USOC, and we said we will spend, in order to do X, Y, and Z programs that we planned out, we need to get this equipment first quarter, and we'll launch these programs, and then we'll pay me this, and then we'll do the next quarter. It was, okay, now we're going to buy this equipment, and we'll pay. So that's, we took it check by check and quarter by quarter.
Wow. Okay. And so it seems to me, though, at this point, you're doing programming, you're doing fundraising, you're doing the administrative work that needs to be done, you're doing promotion and marketing, I assume. As we start to accumulate equipment, I assume there's an equipment maintenance component to it. You're a little bit of everything, isn't it?
Yeah, we had a lot of people involved, though. It wasn't all me. One of our board members, Noelle McKenzie, she was a friend and a board member. She did a lot of the marketing and all of that was her, those early years. My first real experience in our office and at Sports Center of Richmond, where you are, was bringing in Natalie, now Natalie Jasper, who it was like the first week I was full-time staff, and she came in, somehow found us as a possible internship site from Slippery Rock University, and she was like, I want to intern. I said, are you sure? I mean, it was like we weren't even really established yet.
How in the world did she find us from Slippery Rock when you were in your first week? I mean, I realized we'd been some.
We had 5 years of being around and people hearing about us, and I honestly can't remember. She'd know more than I, obviously, of how she connected, if it was through a conference. But I think we did maybe look to get other students after that from Slippery Rock. But our old blue van, that was her family's van. That was our first vehicle. $2,500. We bought it off her dad.
Which, if I remember correctly, there was a significant number of miles on that vehicle, which we may have doubled. I mean, we put a lot of miles in that vehicle too, though. I mean, a pretty big amount.
Yep.
Old blue, was that what you called it?
Old blue.
We didn't get rid of that van until, it wasn't that long ago, honestly.
There should have been a ceremony for that thing.
Had a lot of sportable miles on it, I take it.
We did.
Well, okay, so Natalie comes in. So if I may ask, who are some of the other, important figures, or, board members, volunteers, staff, whoever the case may be?
Yeah, I think that, gosh, my list is long here. Lee got involved when Taylor got involved. And that connection with Bon Secours was very strong, and just having her on the board and her leadership and her, community connections, that really took us to the next level.
Can I just say, Lee, I'll always have a sweet spot in my heart for Lee because A, she hired me, but also B, she was the first example I saw of a mother that wouldn't take no in terms of needing something for their child, which I've always said is like the strongest thing in the world,
Exactly. Yep, she's rock star. And I think, that the Monument 10K and getting involved in that, I think you asked me in advance of this, what was my vision, and maybe you've got that on your list, but I would just say that my hope from the beginning, and that 10K was probably the most impactful event because I thought that that was the best opportunity for really affecting that attitudinal change of people in the community, where if we could get on that starting line with our athletes, we could start to change the perceptions people had of individuals with physical disabilities and what they could and couldn't do. And I still believe that to this day, that just being able to be out and participate in things that are already happening, was really all I wanted to see happen. Whether it was the CarMax Youth Basketball League in the summer, making sure the boys were out there playing that. If it was the regatta for rowing out on the James, making sure we had an adaptive team in there, just wherever we could be and provide an experience and be able to showcase the abilities of our athletes. That was it for me.
So as those things started to happen, what kind of effect did it, what kind of impact did it have on the organization, just in terms of, reach and appeal?
I just think that's where people come out of the woodwork to help. Then that's where you get the next board member. That's where we would make the connection, the VCU connection. That was a matter of really just renting space at Sportsbacker Stadium for a Paralympic experience that we were required to hold for our Paralympic Sports Club designation. And we had to rent space. And after we did it once with just 2 staff doing this, community awareness event, we were like, we need help. And then it was, however it came to be, this relationship with the Center for Sports Leadership to get the students to plan it every semester and have them be the ones to do that work. And then that just elevates our ability to reach more people, and to get other organizations involved, because they would go out and get the sponsors, and it would open up different communication there.
Well, I always like to say that Richmond, Virginia is the world's largest small town. So a lot of those connections probably tend to feed off themselves, right? With other volunteers and then athletes and everything else. So this is about the time when I get involved. I get involved in 2009, I guess, officially as a volunteer coach. And so that's when I kind of have a general understanding of at least some of the numbers. But I mean, there's a lot of growth happening in all of your programs. You've got a growth in athletes and your growth in volunteers. And how are you managing all of that?
It was a lot of work. I remember that first list of athletes was like 65 athletes.
Oh.
But it truly was, it became, at the time, I didn't have children, so it was very early on, it was just everything I did, let's go rock climbing on the weekend. Let's, whatever the opportunity was, we wouldn't say no. If someone said we should do this, we do this. Participate in a triathlon, sure. It was, if we had 1 or 2 athletes interested, we would do it.
Well, funny enough, you mentioned rock climbing. So this is something I didn't plan on asking you, but I didn't know. I mean, you guys did rock climbing when you were here? That was a passion of Kat Anthony's, and Kat kind of begrudgingly, just kept pushing and pushing. And finally we did a couple of dates, and then it was so successful that we ended up making it one of our kind of core competencies. I had no idea that we had done it so long ago. Did you do it?
Yeah, Christian was little. Yeah, we did it at whatever that place was in Chesterfield County, the indoor rock climbing place.
Yeah, Peak Experiences.
Yes.
Of course, they're here now in SCORE, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was one, I can remember, and I'm not sure if he's involved now, but there was one of, we came, because of my background as a recreation therapist, that's how I was involved and did some mentoring down at VCU, and that's how I'd met Dr. McKinley. And so that's how he got involved. Dr. Sifu got involved, Dr. Sifu was at the VA hospital with me, the head of PM&R, and then there was Dr. McKinley on the spinal cord injury unit. So because of that, there was connections to the spinal cord injury community. And I remember this one gentleman was on our mailing list for 5 years, and we never removed anyone from our mailing list. So we just kept sending them to him. And we used to have a referral system where there was like little notepads that Dr. McKinley had in his office, and he would give them, it was almost like a script. He would give a new spinal cord injury to say, you've got to contact Sportable. And so he gave us, somehow we got this guy's information. Maybe he signed up, never came to anything, never came. I can remember so many volunteers or people asking, you know, should we take his name off the list? And we never did. And he finally did show up for rock climbing. And after 5 years of being injured, you know, because with spinal cord injury, it can take some time before they might be ready to do something like that. You know, so I just always believed we would never stop. You never remove anybody from the list. If we got their information once, we were going to keep going with it, in the hopes that someday they'd come out and participate. But yeah, there was a, you know, connection there. Obviously, Carrie Gannon, through that partnership with CSL, you know, that just, she ended up interning, staying with us. Carrie Sally was another intern. We had a lot of interns kind of come through and stay involved, and I think that really helped keep us going, keep us strong. And then we brought Becky up from Florida. She had been doing adaptive sports down here in Florida for a long time, and came up and moved to Richmond. So that was huge. With her wealth of knowledge and experience, that really changed things for us, because she had worked for Blaze Sports Club, and they'd been around since the '96 games. So they, you know, she hadn't worked for them that long, but she definitely had that community experience. And at the time, I looked to their organization down here in Tampa as, you know, the gold seal. So.
Well, so like you mentioned Carrie Gannon, close to my heart because Carrie was here when I was here. And then Becky, I worked a lot with Becky when I was doing, and actually I worked a lot with Natalie, worked a lot with Becky during the soccer, but obviously, you know, great folks. It was something that you said that really resonated with me. The conversation we had today. So you mentioned Dr. Seafood, Dr. McKinley. Dr. McKinley was on our board for probably 10 years because he was on there for quite a long time with you, and then was here for a couple years with me. And then Dr. Seafood has become a friend. He is a stallion, to say the least. He's a wild card. But talking about never taking a name off the list and what the referral process looks like, just to let you know, the community of disability achievement, if you will, within Richmond has come so far since your days. And I think Sportable's had a really big part of that, which is a testament to your work. Today, I had a conversation with someone from Sheltering Arms because they're opening the Sheltering Arms Institute. And we're talking about what the referral system looks like for athletes here. And, you know, we still don't want to get rid of names, but now there's actually a rehabilitation facility that's right here in our market that will feed athletes and hopefully continue the work of creating opportunities and transforming lives, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So I love our mission, and we talk about it often. Is there any, I didn't prep you for this at all, but where did that come from, this creating opportunities and transforming lives?
So, and I did write this down to share it. So I want to say it was Carrie Sally. So it was one of whoever started our Twitter account. This was one of the intern Twitter accounts, yes. So our Twitter account was started, and I had nothing to do with it, but they started tweeting. And a gentleman named Jonathan McNamara, who was working for Media Pond at the time, with Andy, they followed our tweets and they reached out and they wanted to connect with us and see how they could help us.
Wow.
And yeah, and so that was what kind of created that catapulting relationship with Media Pond that then turned into the rebranding and the strategic planning and the Vision 2020 with Bob and Karen. And so it started with a tweet.
A tweet.
A tweet.
Well, that makes me respect Twitter even more because it's one of my favorite social media forms, even though I don't love social media. But it makes me love Bob Kelly and Andy Lynn even more than I already do. I mean, that's really awesome. I had no idea.
Yep. Jonathan left and went to the Red Cross, but he always stayed involved and supportive. But yeah, obviously Andy is the Sportable mastermind of it. But so when it came to the logo, we went through a big process with Bob, which was such a transformational experience for me, because the first time around with our logo, it was really just, I mean, the name was something that I had come up with Noelle, and we had a friend of hers that designed the first logo. So it was very like, just get something out there. It was great work because it was quality people involved. But this process involved the board. It was like 6 months of coming up with this logo design, you know, that they shared with the board, and they chose 3 of their top choices. And we had several words. You know, Bob was famous for putting up this big blank white screen and just typing whatever people threw out there. And I think that there was a mismatch of different words that were thrown out. And one day I called him and I said, I've got it. And he's like, what? And I said, it just hit me this morning what it is. And, you know, it was a variation of something that had been said in those meetings. But I was like, it's really simple. We're creating opportunities and we're transforming lives. That's it. He was like, okay, let's see what they say. So that's where we.
And that has endured. And I, you know, it's been, I guess the focal point of our work ever since, certainly since I've been involved, I've been here. And we haven't made a lot of this public and talked a lot about like some of our strategic reset. There's been the whole COVID situation and other things that have been going on, but we've talked about what the future looks like 3, 5, and even 10 years down the road, particularly with various things happening here. But we've always stayed true to creating opportunities and transforming lives. I just don't, you know, it's lived on. It's been excellent. And frankly, it's a really good representation of what we do and what we strive to achieve through our work. So that came to you. I'm glad it came to you because it's spot on for what we do. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it really is it. And it's not one of those, you know, fluffy ones that people can't remember. I mean, I think that was the other key thing that Bob really ingrained in me, is just, there was a level of authenticity that I felt through that branding process that I think maybe that's why it stuck for the organization, because it's authentic to what our athlete, you know, what's happening. It's not some words that don't really relate.
Hey, so listen, so one other topic, or at least question I wanted to ask of you, I as an organization, as we've kind of grown up and matured, one of the things I think we do actually pretty well is put on events. And it was a little bit of my background coming from the kickers, and then we've added some of that expertise, but some of that expertise was clearly evident before I joined the team for some of the events that you did. Is it worthwhile for you to talk about, there was the tennis event that was early on, there was a regional competition that you held, there were camps and clinics. I mean, are there some events that really stand out that were kind of impactful in shaping the organization early on?
Yeah, I mean, I always really got excited by events. And Becky was great at those too. And, you know, we just, like I said, it was always, we'd bring in these Paralympic athletes or somebody, you know, Karen Korb for tennis, Anjali Pratt, she came in and did our I think it was our first Paralympic experience out at Sports Backers, you know, and she did the monument. She was the only person, well, at least with us involved, the first wheelchair racer that did the Monument 10K or the marathon, whatever she did. We didn't have wheelchair racing yet as a sport or anything, but we wanted to put her on that starting line while she was here in town, and we coordinated, I think, the 10K and the Paralympic experience to be the same weekend so that we could take advantage of her being here and have her do that event.
That's a big weekend.
Yeah, and she was not thrilled about the cobblestones, if I remember correctly. I mean, because she was fast and she was good. But you know, those events really did make a difference. Mid-Atlantic Games was a big undertaking. They'd been done for many years, and that was, you know, we're bringing in again. That was heavy on Becky, and Karen Korb was on our team at that point on staff, and you know, the two of them, they'd done so much with Blaze Sports and Paralympic Sport Tampa Bay that that I have to give them 100% credit for, because I didn't have that experience to do
Well,
events.
Atlantic, what was that, 2013?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and that, that was successful because right before that, because of our partnership that had started to form through Dr. McKinley with VCU and everything, and having the residents volunteer and be required as part of their residency to volunteer through the program, we received some funding, and actually that was another random thing where NBC 12 came in, wanted to schedule a meeting, and they said, hey, we've got this proposal. If we go together and we pitch this, we want to create these commercials for you. You keep half the money for your general operating, and we'll keep the other half for creating the commercials. And so the whole buildup was for the first time that the Paralympic Games were going to be aired on NBC. And so we had a big viewing party at some restaurant when they first went on. But that, high quality. They won Emmy for those commercials, and just the level of visibility that we had. And then we did the Mid-Atlantic Games. It just started things rolling.
Well, and again, something that's been kind of a theme throughout this conversation, but relationships that continue to this day. James Fernald is a good friend and has been very good to us, and NBC has been very good to us. And as we've gotten bigger, we've gotten relationships with a lot of the television stations in town. We're still a relatively small town, but we know most of everybody. But NBC is there from the beginning, and just really good people, and really cares about the work and cares about the impact. And that started in 2012.
And it was always all very organic, like I never went out. I didn't go searching for this relationship with NBC. Didn't go try to find media. It's almost like, I think I shared with you one time when we were chatting about Mark Grossman and where you're sitting right now. When I knew we were going to need some home or place to be or place to work out of, I went back to my professor that was there when we developed this whole program, and he, mentioned that, hey, next year or something, there's this guy, he's going to be, he bought this building, he's going to open the sports complex, maybe you should reach out to him. And it just happened that I met Mark a different way, but that's where Sportable came to have its home at SCORE. And, Mark's support was just getting our insurances for all these crazy sports we decided adding. And, that was key. And, we talk about, I've shared a lot of good, positive things, but there were some tough times. That first year, all those checks came in right on the first of every quarter, and it was nice and pretty, and you could have put a bow on it, and everything worked out well. And then come January 2011, there was a delay. And then it was not just me that had to, figure out how to get paid. We had, I think Natalie was on staff at that time. So, a lot of people helped get through those lovely grant transition times. The funding is not quite on schedule. And one of our board members, Amy Wilkinson, who I know is still involved.
She's the best. Her whole family, they're great.
Yeah, her and Rafe, I remember that phone call. It was in May of 2011, and we were still struggling with the delays that started in January. And, it was like, what are we going to do? And I think I was tasked with a contingency plan. And it was, what are you, Kristen, the board told me we had this emergency call. Okay, we can't keep trying to patch the holes in this boat with, loans, whatever, somebody coming through with something, a donation. So we're going to, we need you to do a contingency plan. And I remember saying, I did it. And I sent it to them. And I said, but we're never going to talk about it again, because it's not going to happen. And one thing that Amy said on that call was, well, I could have a party in my backyard. And there was the tailgate. And that did save us that May, that got us through. to the next one and to the next one, and then
Mm-hmm.
Anthem and Scott Golden, and again, we'd look at other organizations. Where were they getting their grants and funding from? There was a club in North Carolina that was getting this Blue Cross and Blue Shield grant, and it was like, okay, we're doing the same thing. So we just kept trying to, figure out who the right partners were to support what we were doing, mirroring that based on what other organizations across the country were doing. So Blue Cross and Blue Shield was another huge partnership for us.
Hey, so something I did not ask you, but I feel compelled to ask. Looking back on it, is there anything that you would have done differently, or is there anything like that? I don't want to say any regrets. I'm not a big regret person. I don't know if you are, but is there anything that you would have done differently?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think in the moment of every decision, good, bad, or indifferent, whether it was related to staffing changes or things, it always at the time was, I think, the best thing for the organization.
Yeah.
So, and I did the best with what I had, and I learned and grew as I was going. So sure, do I, sometimes I wished it wasn't so hard, I think. And that somebody handed you some master plan and said, just do these things and follow this. It wasn't ever like that. It's not like when we built it on paper, it was literally a program. It wasn't like this massive business plan about growth and how we're going to decide to add, it wasn't so organized. So I tried to add organization and infrastructure as we grew, and really saw the value in that, but it certainly was very organic.
Building the train as you go down the tracks a little bit. Building the train as you go down the tracks.
Yeah.
One thing, so this is obviously thinking about Sportable and our 15th year anniversary, our birthday and all that good stuff. But, obviously a lot of our early success and frankly, the reason we're here ties into you. So how has this experience changed you and impacted you? And, particularly as you've moved on to phase 2 or 4 or wherever you are in terms of your journey down into Florida?
Oh, that's a good question. More learning happened in those 10 years than any MBA program would ever take. So, now for me, it's been a lot of reflection of just process. I feel like since I've been here, I've been in different environments, served as executive director in different roles, very different roles, where there's a facility involved that I have to manage. There's many more employees, 50 employees reporting to me. It just larger, but at the same time, it all is the same. And so for me, there's always a lot of reflection around, I can't, the learning that happened for me as a professional through building Sportable, it continues to stay with me. The tools that I, created or did, or those strategy ways that I approach things, I've learned from them and adapted them and continue to apply them.
You've worn those hats in various different roles down there too, huh?
Yeah, I would say so.
Well, so that vision that you had and that maybe you and Jenny shared, just in terms of breaking down those barriers and breaking and changing those attitudes within the community. I mean, was that accomplished when you were here? And do you feel satisfied that your vision was achieved?
Oh, I think you and the team there have done an amazing, amazing job beyond my wildest dreams of where the organization has gone. So yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think I mentioned to you, I was on a webinar with Susan Wilkes from the Community Foundation up there a couple weeks ago. or no, it was last week. It was just last week. But you know, when I'm on there and I introduce myself and I say I don't live there anymore, but I stay involved with the ENLP alumni program, and I was like, but when I was in Richmond, I was with Sportable, and they're like, oh yeah, So I remember the days when it was like, Sportable. So what is that? There's no 30-second elevator speech needed in a lot of the conversations I have now. So that's a testament to whether it's successful or not.
Yeah. Well, for whatever it's worth, I'm certainly glad that turned in that school project, that requirement of graduation, if you will, has turned into something that has impacted the lives of. We were trying to do the math the other day, just thinking about our 15th anniversary, but it's been thousands. I mean, really, thousands of athletes, thousands upon thousands of volunteers, people that have come through. We're very lucky now that a lot of our competitive teams are able to travel all over the country and compete. Some of our individual athletes are able to go and compete, and obviously none of it's possible without the success of the community and the donors. And we like to refer to them as our Sportable family, right? So our athletes, volunteers, coaches, and donors to make it all possible. But none of it's possible without the vision that you guys had, 15 and maybe a half years ago when you guys started to put this thing together. I mean, it's been fun to be part of the story. And I'm glad you guys did what you did back then, because it's been fun. I'm glad I've been a part of it. And you guys have certainly made a mark on this community and frankly, and beyond. So it's been pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much. I mean, look, got my little timer here. I'm trying to be good. And I mean,
yeah, you are 6:59.
Right, we're right at it. After our technology reboots and everything else, we're right at 52 minutes, which, believe it or not, I read something the other day that effective podcasts are 55 minutes and under. So maybe it's a good spot.
This is the magic.
Maybe so. Listen, it was great catching up with you. Thank you for everything that you've done, that you continue to do for our organization. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot tonight. I hope other people did too.
Thank you, Hunter. Keep it up. It's awesome.
We'll do it. My best to the whole family down there in sunny Florida.
Yes, and send my best to the whole family there, everyone.
I promise I will.
I love them all.
All right, kiddo. Have a good evening.
You too.
See ya.